Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. One sec. Okay. Let's go to Daniel chapter 5, verses 1 through 31. King Belshazzar prepared a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles, and he was drinking wine in front of them all. While under the influence of the wine, Belshazzar issued an order to bring the gold and silver vessels, the ones that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had confiscated from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, together with his wives and his concubines, could drink from them. So they brought the gold and silver vessels that had been confiscated from the temple, the house of God, in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, together with his wives and his concubines, drank from them. As they drank wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. At that very moment, the finger of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the royal palace wall, opposite the lampstand. The king was watching the back of the hand that was writing. Then all the color drained from the king's face, and he became alarmed. The joints of his hips gave way, and his knees began knocking together. The king called out loudly to summon the astrologers, wise men, and diviners. The king proclaimed to the wise men of Babylon that anyone who could read this inscription and disclose its interpretation would be clothed in purple, and have a golden collar placed on his neck, and be third ruler in the kingdom. So all the king's wise men came in, but they were unable to read the writing or to make known its interpretation to their king. Then King Belshazzar was very terrified, and he was visibly shaken. His nobles were completely dumbfounded. Due to the noise caused by the king and his nobles, the queen mother then entered the banquet room. She said, "O king, live forever. Don't be alarmed. Don't be shaken. There's a man in your kingdom who has within him a spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, he proved to have insight, discernment, and wisdom like that of the gods. King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, appointed him chief of the magicians, astrologers, wise men, and diviners. Thus there was found in this man Daniel, whom the king renamed Belteshazzar, an extraordinary spirit, knowledge, and skill to interpret dreams, solve riddles, and decipher knotty problems. Now summon Daniel, and he will disclose the interpretation." So Daniel was brought in before the king. The king said to Daniel, "Are you that Daniel who is one of the captives of Judah, whom my father, the king, brought from Judah? I have heard about you, how there is a spirit of the gods in you, and how you have insight, discernment, and extraordinary wisdom. Now the wise men and astrologers were brought before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation. But they were unable to disclose the interpretation of the message. However, I have heard that you are able to provide interpretations and to decipher knotty problems. Now, if you are able to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, you will wear purple and have a golden collar around your neck and be third ruler in the kingdom." But Daniel replied to the king, "Keep your gifts and give your rewards to someone else. However, I will read the writing for the king and make known its interpretation. As for you, O king, the Most High God bestowed on your father Nebuchadnezzar a kingdom, greatness, honor, and majesty. Due to the greatness that he bestowed on him, all peoples, nations, and language groups were trembling with fear before him. He killed whom he wished. He spared whom he wished. He exalted whom he wished, and he brought low whom he wished. And when his mind became arrogant and his spirit filled him with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne, and his honor was removed from him. He was driven from human society. His mind was changed to that of an animal. He lived with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like oxen, and his body became damp with the dew of the sky, until he came to understand that the Most High God rules over human kingdoms and appoints over them whomever he wishes. But you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled yourself, although you knew all this. Instead, You have exalted yourself against the Lord of heaven. You brought before you the vessels from his temple, and you and your nobles, together with your wives and concubines, drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, gods that cannot see, or hear, or comprehend. But you have not glorified the God who has in his control your very breath and all your ways. Therefore, the palm of a hand was sent from him, and this writing was inscribed. This is the writing that was inscribed: Mene, Mene, Tekel, Pharsin. This is the interpretation of the words. As for Mene, God has numbered your kingdom's days and brought it to an end. As for Tekel, you are weighed on the balances and found to be lacking. And for Peres, your kingdom is divided and given over to the Medes and Persians. Then, on Belshazzar's orders, Daniel was clothed in purple, a golden collar was placed around his neck, and he was proclaimed third ruler in the kingdom. And in that very night, Belshazzar, the Babylonian king, was killed. So Darius the Mede took control of the kingdom when he was about 62 years old. So, this is one of the sons of Nebuchadnezzar that succeeded Nebuchadnezzar as king. From David Guzik's commentary, according to the ancient historian Berosus, after Nebuchadnezzar died, after 43 years reigning on the throne, his son Evil Merodach ruled for 2 years when he was assassinated by his brother-in-law, Nergal-Lasser, because his rule was arbitrary and licentious. Nergal-Lasser, mentioned as Nergal-Sharezer in Jeremiah, ruled for 4 years until he died a natural death. His son, Laboros Sorkad, only a child and of diminished mental capacity, ruled for only 9 months when he was beaten to death by a gang of conspirators. The conspirators appointed Nabonidus, one of their gang, to be king. He ruled until Cyrus, the Persian, conquered Babylon. So, for a long time, historians and archaeologists knew that Nabonidus was said to be the last king of Babylon, not Belshazzar, who was Nabonidus's eldest son. The solution to this so-called discrepancy was apparent when evidence was uncovered indicating not only Belshazzar's association with Nabonidus on the throne, but also demonstrating that during the last part of his reign, Nabonidus lived in Arabia and left the conduct of the kingdom of Babylon to his eldest son, Belshazzar. There was no additional mention of Belshazzar, the eldest son and co-regent with Nabonidus, until the Nabonidus cylinder was discovered in this century. It is now displayed in the British Museum. According to Babylonian records, Belshazzar became co-regent in the 3rd year of Nabonidus' reign in 553 BC, and continued in that capacity till the fall of Babylon, 539 BC. It is most likely that at the time of Daniel, chapter 5, Nabonidus had gone out to fight the Medo-Persian army and had been already captured. Those armies now surrounded Babylon and were looking for a way into the strongly defended city, of which Belshazzar is currently throwing himself a feast. The last feast of his life. So, got a little bit of context on that now. Let's continue on to 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 22. But false prophets arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you. These false teachers will infiltrate your midst with destructive heresies, even to the point of denying the master who bought them, As a result, they will bring swift destruction on themselves, and many will follow their debauched lifestyles. Because of these false teachers, the way of truth will be slandered, and in their greed, they will exploit you with deceptive words. Their condemnation, pronounced long ago, is not sitting idly by. Their destruction is not asleep. For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but threw them into hell, and locked them up in chains and utter darkness, to be kept until the judgment, and if he did not spare the ancient world, but did protect Noah, a herald of righteousness, along with 7 others, when God brought a flood on an ungodly world, and if he turned to ashes the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, when he condemned them to destruction, having appointed them to serve as an example to future generations of the ungodly, and if he rescued Lot, a righteous man in anguish over the debauched lifestyle of lawless men, for while he lived among them day after day, that righteous man was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. If so, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from their trials, and to reserve the unrighteous for punishment at the day of judgment, especially those who indulge their fleshly desires and who despise authority. Brazen and insolent, they are not afraid to insult the glorious ones. Yet even angels, who are much more powerful, do not bring a slanderous judgment against them before the Lord. But these men, like irrational animals, creatures of instinct, born to be caught and destroyed, do not understand whom they are insulting, and consequently, in their destruction they will be destroyed, suffering harm as the wages for their harmful ways. By considering it a pleasure to carouse in broad daylight, they are stains and blemishes, indulging in their deceitful pleasures, when they feast together with you. Their eyes, full of adultery, never stop sinning. They entice unstable people. They have trained their hearts for greed, these cursed children. By forsaking the right path, they have gone astray, because they followed the way of Balaam, son of Bosor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness, yet was rebuked for his own transgression. A dumb donkey, speaking with a human voice, restrained the prophet's madness. These men are waterless springs and mists driven by a storm, for whom the utter depths of darkness have been reserved. For by speaking high-sounding but empty words, they are able to entice with fleshly desires and with debauchery people who have just escaped from those who reside in error. Although these false teachers promise such people freedom, they themselves are enslaved to immorality. For whatever a person succumbs to that he is enslaved. For if after they have escaped the filthy things of the world, through the rich knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, they again get entangled in them and succumb to them, their last state has become worse for them than their first. For it would have been better for them never to have known the way of righteousness, than, having known it, to turn back from the holy commandment that had been delivered to them. They are illustrations of this true proverb: a dog returns to its own vomit, and a sow, after washing herself, wallows in the mire. Whew. Oh, Lord, help us not to stumble into becoming a false prophet. In verse 2, and many will follow their debauched lifestyles. Because of these false teachers, the way of truth will be slandered. To me, that parallels what happened in the Old Testament with the children of Israel. They were called to a higher standard than the nations around them, but they didn't live up to that and instead acted worse than the nations around them. And in that way, the nations around them blasphemed the name of God. So what should have been a light to the peoples became a source of contempt and blasphemy to God. Yeah, these teachers certainly aren't examples of good conduct. Yeah. Let's carry on. Psalm 119, verses 113 to 128. Samak, I hate people with divided loyalties, but I love your law. You are my hiding place and my shield. I find hope in your word. Turn away from me, you evil man, so that I can observe the commands of my God. Sustain me as you promised, so that I will live. Do not disappoint me. Support me so that I will be delivered. Then I will focus on your statutes continually. You despise all who stray from your statutes, for they are deceptive and unreliable. You remove all the wicked of the earth like slag. Therefore, I love your rules. My body trembles because I fear you. I am afraid of your judgments. I do what is fair and right. Do not abandon me to my oppressors. Guarantee the welfare of your servant. Do not let the arrogant oppress me. My eyes grow tired as I wait for your deliverance, for your reliable promise to be fulfilled. Show your servant your loyal love. Teach me your statutes. I am your servant. Give me insight so that I can understand your rules. It is time for the Lord to act. They break your law. For this reason, I love your commands more than gold, even purest gold. For this reason, I carefully follow all your precepts. I hate all deceitful actions. In verse 114, it says, You are my hiding place and my shield. I find hope in your word. In another verse elsewhere, it says that the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are saved. So, fleeing to the Lord for protection is a good thing. Trusting in the Lord. Okay, well, Proverbs. Chapter 28, verses 19 and 20. The one who works his land will be satisfied with food, but whoever chases daydreams will have his fill of poverty. A faithful person will have an abundance of blessings, but the one who hastens to gain riches will not go unpunished. Yeah, the truism, I don't know if it's a truism, the saying, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Especially with get-rich-quick schemes. Generally don't work out. But faithfulness is a way to have abundant blessings. Okay, well, thank you for joining me today. Appreciate it. Bye.